Welcome to the Mint Door Podcast with Dr. Karen Tyndall and Dr. Laura Schwint.
Are you feeling like a high achiever who is stuck in a rut? The Mint Door Podcast is your escape hatch. But before we dive into today's inspiring guest, let's talk about adding some serious flavor to your week. We want to introduce you to the Mint Julep, our weekly newsletter that's the perfect antidote to burnout. It's more than just words on a screen, it's a virtual happy hour with a supportive community of high achievers brimming with inspiration, positivity, and a dash of fun. Think of it as your chance to unwind, recharge, and rediscover the joy in everyday hustling. Sign up for the Mint Julep with the link in the show notes, and let's clink glasses or coffee mugs to a more inspired and joyful life, 1 week at a time. If you are more of a visual person and want a visual pick-me-up, we've got you covered. Find all our podcasts and bite-sized coaching tips on YouTube. You can find them at youtube.com/@themintdoor. And there you can subscribe for happiness on the go. So with no further ado, welcome to another exciting episode of the Mint Door Podcast. Today, we have an extraordinary guest who embodies the essence of holistic wellness. Meet Plante, a true wellness enthusiast with a passion for both physical and mental health. Ella's journey is nothing short of inspiring. She's not only a dedicated dental student at the University of Toronto, but also a relentless seeker of the latest fitness trends and a seasoned endurance event athlete too. When she's not encouraging her friends to join her in half marathons, Ella can be found traveling, reading, cooking, and cherishing moments with her loved ones. Her wellness journey has evolved to embrace emotional and mental well-being through practices like therapy, journaling, and daily gratitude. As part of her mission, Ella has been a beacon of encouragement for her fellow dental students at the University of Toronto, promoting the integration of wellness modalities into their daily routines. With a vision to extend this mission beyond her immediate community, Ella is here to share her passion for wellness with the broader dental people. Now get ready for an energizing conversation that will leave you feeling inspired and motivated to embrace a holistic approach to dental well-being. Let's dive into our podcast with Ella. So thank you, Ella, for joining us in the Mint Door today. We are super excited to have you here. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very honored to be on the show. This is my first podcast appearance, so
then we are equally honored back to have you for your first podcast, because I am pretty sure that this probably will not be your last one. So let's jump straight into some questions for you. Now, we know that you love prioritizing wellness, mind, body, and spirit, and it's somewhat of your secret weapon for success. So as a dental student, what's some advice that you've got for other dental students, maybe of how they can rock those intense classes and feel amazing at the same time?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, wellness for me has definitely been a journey. It started over the course of my life, kind of really focused on physical wellness. I played sports growing up. I was always really into exercising. It became weightlifting for a bit. I joined my rowing team in university. Now we're on to triathlon. So I feel like that part has almost been a habit for me, which has been really easy, but it's transitioned more now into really tapping into mental well-being, emotional well-being. Mm-hmm. So looking more into like journaling, prioritizing therapy, kind of things like that. So I feel like some tips for me that I found really helpful. One is just blocking it out in your calendar. It sounds very basic and it sounds really straightforward, but I'll go on my iCal. I'll literally block out a chunk, like an hour, a couple hours, whatever I'm feeling that day, and I'll dedicate that time to myself. So for me, like, for example, during exams, I felt like I was pretty slammed trying to study. We had the whole month off in April, but I was like, okay, I need to really focus on having that time. So I'd block out, this was my little goal for myself, at least for exams. I had a goal of 1 hour of just personal work every single day, no matter what, no excuses. So I would put it in my calendar and I'd prioritize it every single day. And honestly, it kept me sane during exams because I'd spend that time like focusing on myself. I'd spend that time reading. I'd spend that time journaling. I spend that time sometimes just sitting down with a clipboard, brainstorming ideas about, my career or just anything really. So I would say that's been a really big tip for me that has helped me tremendously. Another one I would say is just doing it with friends. I think if you're just getting started and it's kind of hard to, motivate yourself to get going, have someone hold you accountable. I know I did this a lot when I was in undergrad, and now it's been kind of me, the one who's holding my friends accountable. But, having a buddy to do something good for your body, do something good for your mind makes a world of difference. So I would say those are kind of the two main things that have really helped keep me on track, and I think would help other people too.
How do you think you would feel if you didn't do that?
Like maintain.
If you didn't have that hour a day set aside for you during that time of, lots of studying, and what would have you been like had you not had that opportunity?
Yeah, honestly, I'd be quite drained. I think for me, for example, working out is a huge staple. Like, it's not that I have to do it every single day, but it's usually just how I start my day, and it gives me kind of the clear mind to focus on the rest of the day. I think too, I mean, numerous studies have shown that when you get your blood flowing and you exercise, you focus a lot better, you're a lot more productive, you're a lot more capable of tackling the day. So just from that standpoint, I feel like it's really important. But even the personal work, that's something I've been introducing, or I introduced starting just a few months ago and have been more diligent about it. But I think it's just helped me unwind too. Before I started dental school, I had been a really avid reader. Like I'd read like 30 to 40 books a year and I loved it. And then I started dental school and I dropped off to like one book a year for the first couple of years. And I had forgotten how much I love reading, like just sitting down, grabbing a really awesome book and just letting that be my evening. So I would say one of the big things that I've kind of reintroduced has been reading a little bit more. And to answer your question, that's just helped me unwind. Like it's helped me use my brain in a completely different capacity. And I've really appreciated that because then when I do get back into focusing on school or focusing on studies, sorry, I'm a lot more into it, like I can actually take that time and I'm not like, oh, here we go again,
Yeah. What do you like to read? Is it fiction? Is it nonfiction? What do you read?
Definitely, I would say not very much fiction. I love learning just random things about life, I guess. But I would say the main topics that I really like are probably psychology, business books. I love self-help books, probably a little bit too much. Right now, I'm reading Hidden Potential by Adam Grant, who's a psychologist. So that's been really fun just to learn kind of how we can become the best versions of ourselves. So I would say the rough trend of books that I like to read.
What's the most impactful book if you had to vote your top? Can you vote a top self-help book? Is that too difficult to pick one?
That's really hard. Actually, someone asked me this question recently about the most, I guess, impactful or interesting book I had read recently. And it took me several minutes to answer it because I honestly have so many that I really like. But out of the most recent, this isn't even a self-help book necessarily, but it's kind of one of the books that's helped me shift my perspective a lot. And it's The Surrender Experiment. The Surrender Experiment. I'm trying to make sure I get the title right, by Michael Singer. And essentially it's a kind of spiritual book. So it's not exactly what I would have usually read. So it was nice to try something a little bit new. And it's just a story of his life and how he's a spiritual guy and he essentially just lets go of outcomes of his life rather than trying to control everything. And it's just a story of his journey. Like he's this yogi who's living in the forest, and then all of a sudden he's just letting life take him wherever it does. And he becomes the CEO of this massive company, which ends up becoming WebMD. So really interesting story. And I think for me, like such an interesting takeaway from that is that sometimes you have to just let life take you wherever it's meant to, rather than trying to control all the outcomes of things that are just beyond your control. Hence the name Surrendering.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's something I've just really tried to implement into my life. I think during my life, I've not always, but I've had the tendency to be the type of person who wants to know what's going to happen next, who is a little hesitant of doing things, or previously was hesitant of doing things outside my comfort zone or taking big risks because I was like, what's going to happen? And I think reading that helped me really shift my perspective and just let go, you know, control what I can control, aka
Yeah.
myself, my
Yeah.
thoughts, things like that, and just let the rest be. And it's been really liberating. I think it took a lot of stress off of my life. So
Yeah.
I'd say that's probably been the most impactful recently.
I think that's an incredible thing to learn at your age, to be able to just kind of go with the flow and not have to have that need for what happens 6 months out, what happens a year out, and having that plan. That's something that I didn't learn. I was probably 38, 39 when I learned that I'd always had a life that I could always see where I was going. And then it was moving to the United States, leaving dentistry, everything got put up in the air that I didn't know who I was, where I was going, or what I was going to do. And now it took a while to get used to it after living nearly 40 years of being that person. That's one of those things when I get asked the question, what do I wish I could have taught my younger self? I think is exactly what you just said, is just that being okay with just following what happens.
Yeah. I think you told me a little bit about this when we were chatting at the Women in Dentistry conference. And I guess that's maybe what led you to the Mint Door, letting.
I mean, I could never have written the script. I could never written the script. So that sounds like I'll definitely check that book out, because it sounds like one that would be a good one to read and keep reinforcing that message. So, I mean, not knowing what's next is kind of almost the opposite of being in dental school, when you're on a prescriptive path that you have to follow to, sit the tests, to be able to pass, to come out at the end being a dentist. And dental students do not have the easiest life. And I was just wondering if, looking at it from the perspective of a dental student and being in that crowd of people, what limiting beliefs are dental students holding that are keeping them back? And then how can you flip that script that they can have a growth mindset moving on?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think, I still have a ton of limiting beliefs, so I can definitely answer this from my perspective as well. But I would say a big one with regards to dental students is probably thinking that we aren't capable and being so hesitant. I feel like I see that a lot right now, in clinic. Everyone wants to have things checked so many times. And, there's that voice in our heads being like, you just learned this, you can't do it. And I think sometimes it's important to just try. I actually read this in the book that I was just telling you about, Potential, that a lot of people are, this is what Adam Grant found, a lot of people are hesitant to try things before they become an expert. And they think they learn everything and have everything mastered, and then they can start. And that limits a lot of people from starting. And I would say that's probably kind of common here. People want to know all the theory, know as many key steps as possible, and then they'll start. But in reality, sometimes it's really good to just start. You learn as you go. You make mistakes sometimes, and that's totally okay. So I think that's part of it, just getting over the hump and just starting, even if you don't know everything, because we never know everything. We're always learning. We had this chat right before we started the podcast. So, we're always beginners at something every day. You're in a new situation. So I would say that's a big thing in terms of limiting beliefs that I see. I think another limiting belief that I battled probably at the beginning was that part of my identity was tied up in being a dentist, or, academia in general. I remember when I failed my first test, I was so upset. I'd never really failed a test like that. And I was like, oh my gosh, maybe I'm not as smart as I think. And it took me some time to realize that that is no indicator of my intelligence or even my value as a person. And I think it's hard in an environment where we're kind of primed to think that part of our value as, a student is related to these grades and is related to, whether we get an honors or a pass on our clinical work. And I think stepping away from that and realizing that, everyone's personal value is not related to all these external factors would help lessen a lot of the pressure and kind of help with that limiting belief.
Yeah.
So I'd say those are a couple of things that I've kind of seen in myself and probably in some other people too.
Yeah. I think dental school does a very good job at cultivating perfectionists. Even if maybe you're even have those perfectionist tendencies even before you go in, or maybe you don't, but I think it does a very good job at creating people who have to get things perfect. And then that becomes difficult when you're out in the real world, because you don't have 2 hours to see the one patient. You have to do it in 30 minutes. And that, I found that really difficult, was almost thinking, I can't let my standards drop. How am I going to get quicker and still be perfect at the same time? So
I feel like to add on to that, I feel like there's a fine balance between perfectionism and understanding when things are good enough, because sometimes things are good enough, because you could spend, like in the context of dentistry at least, you could spend hours doing an MOD that's perfect and replicates the anatomy and XYZ, whatever you want to do with it. But in reality, A, the patient doesn't care. B, it's not going to impact anything in their mouth. And C, you're just probably going to end up making it worse after a while because you're just fiddling and fiddling and fiddling and fiddling.
Yeah.
So I think too, that comes with probably knowing yourself enough to realize when you've done adequate work to your own standards. And then you can kind of be
I used to have, in the practice that I worked doing orthodontics, we used to have this thing when we got to the end and we were wire bending just to get the teeth in perfect position. I loved wire bending, one of my favorite things. But when you wire bending and you get to a point where you have to say to yourself, step away from the wire, like put it back in and leave it, because it's good. You can't make this any better. So you have to, it's a skill that takes some learning. Definitely.
Yeah. I feel like it's a lifelong journey as a, I guess, pseudo perfectionist, hopefully former perfectionist. It's always a work in progress, trying to find that balance and trying to do your best work while also maintaining sanity.
Having that you have, such an awareness of wellness, well-being, self-care, and those things. How do you cope with seeing other people in dental school who maybe are struggling with those topics and those subjects? When you see people, when there's obvious things that you could think, oh, if only you could do X, Y, and Z. How do you cope with that?
Yeah. I mean, I try not to give unsolicited advice, because oftentimes I feel like when you hear something where you're not in the mindset to listen, it doesn't really help. But it's interesting, I think I've had this happen actually a lot in dental school, where I guess I have this persona maybe that it appears as if I'm very on the ball with all these wellness related topics. So people actually come up to me sometimes and ask like, oh, like what recipes are you using? And they're interested in learning how to eat a little healthier and take care of themselves a little bit better. And I'm always super keen to share, just what I do. Because I think even seeing what someone else does is a huge source of inspiration. At least for me, I love seeing what other people are doing in lots of contexts. And I'm like, I can take a little tidbit from this. I can learn a little bit from that and, try it out, like try this new tactic into my own routine. If it works, great. If it doesn't, at least I tried. So I think just that probably makes a big difference, just having open conversations about it. I think also for me, I try to be really open about things related to, for example, mental health. I'm really open about talking about going to therapy, especially in the context of dental school. And I think there have been scenarios where it's a little uncomfortable to talk about. It's been a few years now that I've been in dental school, so I know everyone a little bit better. So I think that makes it a little easier. But even just being open and talk about those things, I think that helps connect with other people, and they'll be more willing to chat about something that's, a challenge for them in that realm.
Yeah. What are some of your favorite ways to recharge, either emotionally, physically, mentally? Physically, we know that you do a lot of athletic pursuits. What about how do you recharge emotionally at the end of a day?
Yeah, I would say I have a lot of different things that I love doing, but probably one of the main ones is journaling. I started journaling, I guess, a couple of years ago now. And even looking back at my journaling trajectory, it's so funny. Like when I'll read the ones from like right when I started, they're so just bland and objective. It's like, today I went to school. School was hard. Then I went home. So even just looking at that trajectory and seeing now me processing my own emotions a little bit more clearly, me writing out how I felt about a given situation, kind of having more emotional granularity than I've ever had in the past has been really awesome to see, because I think I'm a lot more in tune with myself now because I get all these thoughts down. I actually have a journaling app on my phone. Like I don't carry around a physical journal because I'd probably lose it. And it's nice because anytime I feel like I need to just express something, I can pull out my phone, do a quick little journal, and I'll circle back to them too, because I'll give myself prompts sometimes where I want to dive deeper into a certain topic and see, what else comes up in my mind about it. So I'd say journaling is a really big one to kind of let it all go, unwind, relax. I also really love art. I don't know if you can see in my background, there's an unfinished painting on an easel.
Yeah, I noticed there's something on its side. Yeah.
Yeah, it should be on the wall. I haven't put it up yet, and I've been living here for over 3 months. But I really love painting. Painting's a really fun way for me to unwind. I don't have tremendous amount of skill, but it's nice to just do something. Same thing with drawing. I'm really into drawing. I don't do it that often anymore, but here and there I'll just pull out I have some like pencil crayons literally in my desk right now. And I'll do some drawing. And then other than that, I really love cooking. Cooking's kind of mindless for me because I've been cooking for so long. And I think just sitting down and like, now that I don't have too much going on, at least with exams, it's not really a chore. It's fun. Like it's a fun way for me to take care of myself and unwind a little bit. So I'd say those are some of the things that
That's
I
cool.
really enjoy.
For some people who don't journal, it can seem like, where would I start? What would your advice be for somebody who has never journaled, and let's say this evening they want to pick up pen and paper or an app like you've got? How do you start?
Yeah, it's definitely a journey of like making it a priority. I know when I started, I'd go on and off for a bit, and then I'd slack and like write like one sentence in my journal. So I think for me, when I started getting a lot more into it, I made myself a little challenge. I'm a sucker for anything that involves a little challenge for myself. Like if you ask anyone in my family, at least they'll be like, yeah, always with those 30-day challenges, I go in and I'm like, okay, for 30 days, I'm gonna do this. If it sticks, great. If it doesn't, it's done. But I think that really helps. In terms of actually journaling though, the journaling app I use is called, what's it called? Gotta look. Day One to check my apps. It's on my computer too. It's called Day One, and they give you little prompts each day. So if you're feeling really uninspired, you can just look at the prompts. For me, one of the things I like to do in my journal as well, and something that I've made a really big habit of mine that I do also every single day, in addition to like writing about other random thoughts, is just practicing daily gratitude. So at the end of the day, I'll write out my grateful moments, like 5 for myself, like 5 things I'm grateful for about myself, and then 5 things just about my life and like pertaining to that day. And I would say that's a little more clear and targeted in terms of journaling, and it helps you reflect on your day. So I feel like that prompt kind of, it's 2 birds, 1 stone. You get into the journaling, you start learning about yourself a little bit more, but then also just practicing daily gratitude, I feel like has really opened my eyes up to all the amazing things in my life. I think especially as it pertains to dental school, I have had so many periods where I just complain and complain and complain. And then I realize like, wait, I worked so hard to be here. Like I wanted to be here. And just being grateful for the things in my life and writing it down, even if I have a really bad day, like I'm sure I can find 5 things to be grateful for. It just really helps me keep my life in perspective. And it's not to say that I can't feel the sadness of challenging times, but it's like, there's always something to be grateful for. So that's,
Yeah.
yeah, a little thing that I like to do and I think is a good way to start journaling.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you for sharing those. One thing that I wanted to ask you about is that you started a wellness club
Yes.
at the University of Toronto. Tell us a little bit about what that is, what it involves, what you do.
Yeah, for sure. So, um, earlier this academic year, my friends and I started Dent Fit. And the goal behind Dent Fit was honestly just to build a community centered around wellness for dental students.
Mhm.
I felt like there is such a big gap there because a lot of people are into wellness, but don't know where to start. Even just the amount of people who would come up to me, like I mentioned earlier, asking for recipes or asking about fitness related things and just wanting to do it, but not really knowing what the best thing to do is. I think that really inspired it because, dentistry is a really high stress profession. And even in dental school, there's a lot of burnout. I feel like a lot of people are really stressed by the a million assignments we have, the million tests, all this clinic stuff that we have to do. So that's the main focus, just building a community around it. And it's just been our first year starting this club. And it's been really awesome to see the turnout. Our first event was just this cute little healthy eating potluck. Everyone brought like their favorite recipes. Um, we shared some of the recipes with each other and just had a cute little evening. And then we had a spin event a few months ago and such a huge turnout for that. I was so proud to see everyone having fun doing something good for their health. And even from that, I would hear later about how people are now really into workout classes because they came to our event and it was just, that's all they needed to get started. So that's been the main objective. And I'm really proud of the team and how much we've accomplished so far. And next steps are hopefully expanding to the broader dental community. I really think this is beneficial for not just dentists, but that's just our niche. And I'm excited to see where it takes us.
That's cool. If people who are listening are interested to learn more about it, where can they find some information?
You can check out our Instagram. It's at DENTXFIT.
Sounds good. We'll put that in the show notes that we've got there. So before we round up today, is there anything exciting on the horizon for Ella? Like what are the next things that are going to happen?
Honestly, so many exciting things. But I would say one of the main exciting things that I have in store, we talked about it at the beginning, is my half Ironman in July. I feel like that's been consuming quite a bit of my time lately with all the swimming at lunchtime, run bike workouts in the morning, and just figuring out how to properly fuel for that race. I'm really excited for that just because it's a challenge. I think what excites me the most these days is doing something outside my comfort zone and trying to find something that will push me in a way that I haven't been pushed before. So I would say that's probably one of the big ones that I'm really pumped to see where it goes. And then other than that, actually, going to a dental conference that you and Laura hooked me up with in Florida. So I'm really pumped about that. First, I don't know if you could call it international, but we'll say international.
It's international. It's international.
Neighbors, but yeah,
to America.
you could call it that.
It's 100% qualifies as international. That's the delivering wow, and this is Homes delivering wow. So you're going to have an amazing time.
Yeah, I'm super pumped about that.
Super excited. So, well, you've got a busy summer ahead.
Yeah.
Fun things and some training. And Laura and I both want to say thank you so much for coming on our podcast. And it's been a pleasure chatting to you as always. And our listeners, you can find out the links that Ella shared will be in the show notes. And we are just grateful that you were here today. We will write that down in our journals tonight, that you are the Mint Door podcast. So thank you very much, Ella. It's been wonderful to chat. To our listeners, know that we adore you, and what we've spoken about today, we hope that you find some encouragement in there too. So when we'll see you again, join us on our Mint Door podcast. So thank you, everybody. Thanks, Ella.
Thanks so much for having me.
Bye.
We adore our listeners. Connect with us at themintdoor.net.